Welcome back, everybody. I'm your host, Michael Rathburn. We have another edition of Rath Learning Curve. This time it's week one college fantasy football on fantasyaces.com. And a couple differences here. One is we have a Thursday, Friday slate. And so we got more games and more players to pick from. So we're going to do a screen share. I'm going to talk about my picks. And I'm going to give you kind of some lineup construction like we've done with FanDuel and DraftKings. So let's get into it. A couple differences. Look, I will tell you this, much like I did with DraftKings. Look, the salaries on week one for Fantasy Aces college football are pretty soft. So you can kind of, make whatever lineup you do want. Caveat being, I think that there's some very interesting value plays that you absolutely must have in your lineup that's going to allow you to pay up on some other guys. But again, I built a lineup and I feel pretty good about it. So we'll go over about 20 guys that I like, 3 or 4 each position, kind of give you an explanation of what's going on there, and kind of build a lineup and see how it goes, and then give you some tips on what players you can sub in and out and build a lineup and hopefully win some money over on Fantasy Aces on Thursday/Friday night. So let's get to it. All right, guys, you see here, basically what I have here is we have a sample lineup for Fantasy Aces, 2 quarterbacks, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, 2 flexes, and a tight end. And these are the picks that I have for Fantasy Aces by position. So let's go down the picks first. If you did watch some of the other videos, some of the same names are going to be on this. However, with Fantasy Aces, couple things. One, we do have some softer salaries, so some other guys come into play. 2, with the addition of the Friday slate, we've got some additional players that we can take a look at. And I think that's where you're going to find an edge, because a lot of people are only going to play on FanDuel and DraftKings and do Thursday research. They're not going to look at Friday. And so I think that's where you're going to have some lineup differentiation and where we can really capitalize. Let's talk about the quarterback position. My number one guy is Marquise Wilson from North Carolina. That's a Thursday game. He's at 58.50. Here's where the value really comes into play. Seth Russell, quarterback at Baylor, at SMU, one of the worst defensives in college football. Huge total in this game. Baylor is a monster favorite. Seth Russell is a new quarterback coming into the system. However, almost all the skill position players are back for Baylor. The whole entire offensive unit is back. Plug and play Seth Russell. You get him at a discount, $53.50. That's probably going to be the cheapest you're ever going to see Seth Russell. So my take on that is take advantage of a buying opportunity. And the only concern I have is, perhaps they do pull him in the third quarter if this game gets out of hand. But again, they're only going to do that if they're up by 45. The good thing about SMU here, SMU does have a new coach, Chad Morris, who we talked about in another video. And so I think SMU is going to be able to put up some points. Now, they're not going to get blown out 50-10, which is actually good for us. I think if this game becomes 45-20, that's going to be beneficial and leave Russell in the game. Sefao Leafu, a quarterback from Colorado, throws the ball a ton. This is a Thursday/Friday game coming into the midnight. Great because it's not really on any of the other slates. You get this guy at 5,100. If you don't want to go Williams and Russell, maybe you want to go Russell Leafu or Williams Leafu. So that's an opportunity, a $250 difference, not too bad. Again, I'm looking at like a tournament where I think Williams and Russell are probably going to be very heavily owned. Obviously, we have Boykin and Doherty out there as well. But, there's going to be some heavy ownership on those big quarterbacks. So if you're looking for a lineup differentiator, I think Liu Fao is the guy that could get that. And then, of course, we got our guy Thomas Sirk all the way down at 4,300. The thing about Sirk here is the salaries are so soft that, I don't know if it's really worth taking him on Fantasy Aces. I'd probably rather go with Sefao Leafu. So I think it's just somebody who I'm going to throw out there, but I don't know if it's worth really taking him. Running back, I'm going to give you 4 running backs. Nick Wilson, is the guy I've talked about him. AJ Ouellette, we get him at a great price at $47.50. Here's a new guy because of the game slate on Friday. Khalif Phillips out of Charlotte. Now, here's the deal with this. Charlotte and Georgia State are two of the worst defenses in college football as we stand today. They're terrible. This over-under is 73, and Georgia State is about a touchdown favorite. Neither one of these teams can stop anybody. You get Khalif Phillips, who's a really good running back and going to really rack up some yards. You get him real cheap at 4,500. He's going to get a ton of carries in this game. So, again, he's a guy that you see over here that I do have in my lineup. Elijah Penny's a guy that I talked about in previous videos from Idaho. You get him cheap at 4,500. Switch over to the tight end position. Some of the same names that you hear me talk about on FanDuel, DraftKings. There's no tight end, so we didn't go over there. Stephen Chow, Vanderbilt, number one option on Vanderbilt. Should be a pretty high scoring game. 42.50 if you want to spend up there. Here's the sneaky guy. Again, we talked about this Charlotte Georgia State game. Joel Ruiz from Georgia State is actually one of the best tight ends in the country. You get him at 39.50. He's a guy I've got plugged into my top lineup. Talked about Tyler Higbee from Western Kentucky. Again, with Dangerfield out, Higbee becomes more of an option, more of a safety valve in this game. So I think, he gets a bump there. And then Jarrell Adams, who we talked about from South Carolina. I keep calling the guy Jarrell Powell. I don't know why. I don't know who Jarrell Powell is, but if you watch my other video, I call him Jarrell Powell. He's obviously not. I think I'm confusing him with Shaq Powell from Duke. So anyway, Jarrell Adams, tight end, you get him all the way down to 3,300. Again, I think for me, I've got to go Ruiz and I've got to go Higbee. I'm not really deviating from anybody else at this spot. I think that those are the two guys that I'm really locked in on. Let's go down to the wide receiver position, and it's loaded, and you get plenty of value. So the number one guy from a price perspective is Nelson Spruce. Now, what you absolutely must do, if you take Sefo Leafo as quarterback, you definitely have to take Nelson Spruce. That is a guarantee. So you got to lock up Spruce. Spruce could be a guy that gets 10 catches, 200 yards, and 3 touchdowns. I mean, it's that ridiculous. So for me, Spruce, the upside is just huge. Another guy. Now, here's the thing. Corey Coleman, Baylor, love the matchup. But Baylor, man, they spread the ball around so much that to me is probably going to be more of I'm going to pair Russell with Coleman, and then maybe I'm going to sneak in some other Baylor wide receivers. That would really be the only play for me but I do like Coleman if you want to switch it up and go Coleman instead of Spruce. But I think here, the number 3 guy is Pharaoh Cooper. I do like him more than Coleman because he's going to get so many targets with this wide receiving core from South Carolina banged up, and the potential that Adams is not 100% as well. So Pharaoh Cooper, absolutely a lock-in for me. Caleb Jones, I think if you go with a new Solomon, you got to have Caleb Jones paired with him. But again, all the way down at 4,900, almost seems like a steal at 4,900 in a game where Arizona, that total has actually jumped significantly. And I think that's because people are behind Arizona. Arizona could put up a monster number. Our boy Desmond Epps all the way down at 4,000. Not as much on play here on aces, only because with the soft cap, I'm able to get in some other guys. But, Colby Listenby, again, at 4K. More of a differentiator, and Brandon Shepard, number 1 wide receiver, Oklahoma State, all the way down at 39.50. If you do want to spend a little bit more at the quarterback position, let's say you ended up going with a guy like Boykin and Williams, then you start dropping down to a guy like Shepard. Can't go wrong there, not at all. I mean, it's tremendous value at the wide receiver position. And then my guy, Austin Duke, I'm from Charlotte, so I know the Charlotte team very well. Austin Duke is a steal at 3,500. He is a must play for me. He's going to get a lot of volume in this game. Again, 73 total. Georgia State is favored by 7. And let's take advantage of perhaps a lot of guys. The Georgia State Charlotte game, the sharp players are going to be on it because the total is 73. But I think a lot of the casual players are going to overlook this game. They're not going to look at it at all. They're not going to, look at these teams. And I think that's really where, if you notice, I've got 3 players in my top lineup: Khalif Phillips, Austin Duke, Joe Ruiz on aces. So if I were to take my top plays and plug them in a lineup, I've got Marquise Williams, Seth Russell, Nick Wilson, AJ Ouellette, Khalif Phillips, Spruce, Pharaoh Cooper, Austin Duke, and Ruiz. Again, Please, try not to use the same exact lineup. What we do ask you is, switch it up on a couple of guys. Look, if you want to go with Coleman instead of Cooper, you want to drop down. You want to go Caleb Jones instead of one of the running backs. Like if you want to go Caleb Jones instead of Olette or Phillips, you want to throw in Elijah Penny instead of Phillips, that kind of thing. You want to bump up Ruiz and go to Shu. That's fine as well. But again, I think there's some great value on Fantasy Aces this week for sure. That I'm really looking forward to playing over on Fantasy Aces. I think there's some great opportunity. Again, Thursday, Friday slate, Fantasy Aces. I think there's going to be some pretty good overlay there on Thursday/Friday and also on Saturday. So, again, check out Fantasy Aces, big $1,500 college fantasy football free roll. Again, so go grab some of that money. We're going to be back here with some Saturday videos later on this week for FanDuel, DraftKings, and also Fantasy Aces. Thanks again, guys.